Welcome to another edition of Inside the Birds Fantasy Football Show with Andrew DiCecco. I'm Jeff Mosher. And of course, that guy right there, that is Andrew DiCecco of InsideTheBirds.com, our senior staff reporter and also our resident fantasy football expert. Well, Andrew, we get to week 4, and you know what people do in week 4. They start to hit the panic button, especially if you've started off 1-2 or you're 0-3. I want to ask you about quarterbacks. I'm sure there were some owners who are banking on a comeback for Carson Wentz or a better year for Matt Ryan or Ben Roethlisberger, may have waited on a quarterback thinking that one of those guys would come through. And now they may be in a situation where they're regretting that decision and trying to find an upgrade on the waiver wire. As you look out there for quarterbacks, is there anyone that stands out as someone you should take a flyer on?
Well, it depends on the size of your league. I mean, I know in one of my leagues, Joe Burrow's still out there. Jimmy Garoppolo's still out there. Jimmy Garoppolo threw for 257 yards in a primetime matchup. He gets the Seattle Seahawks this week. That's a game that they're going to have to put up some points. He's going to have to win with his arm if they want to win. So he'd be a good option. Taylor Heineke would be a good 1 week fill-in, Jeff. 548 yards passing in 2 weeks, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. So you don't like that, but he does give you a little bit on the ground. There's 21 yards for that. And they're going to put up some points. They have Antonio Gibson, you have Terry McLaurin, you have Logan Thomas. So they have a lot of options there. So they're going to be putting up points. So you have to like what he can give you. Now, is he going to be a long-term solution? Probably not. But I think this week when they draw the Falcons, so that's a pretty good matchup for them. And also Jameis Winston's out there. He's a volatile fantasy player as we all know. But he gets the Giants this week, so that's another favorable matchup. So if you're in dire straits at the quarterback position, you could do a lot worse.
Taylor Heineke only rostered in 8% of Yahoo Fantasy Football League. So as you mentioned, somebody you might want to jump on while the getting is good right now and the matchups are good, and maybe somebody who can develop down the road into a pretty good fantasy football quarterback. We see that every year. Speaking of the waiver wire, give me some of your best waiver wire claims for week 4.
Well, let's start with Chuba Hubbard, the running back for the Carolina Panthers. Obviously, if you drafted Christian McCaffrey, you would like to have rostered him already. But if not, if he's out there, you're going to want to grab him because he compiled 11 carries for 52 yards, 3 catches for 27 yards. He's going to get a lot of usage in this offense, Jeff. And I don't know that I would play him this week against Dallas, but you might want to deploy him against the Eagles the following week, given their run defense deficiencies. He's a player that I like there. Tim Patrick, obviously, they just lost your Penn State alum, KJ Hamler, with a torn ACL. And Jerry Jeudy's out of there as well with an injury. So Tim Patrick and Cortland Sutton really are going to assume most of the target share there. Tim Patrick had 5 receptions for 94 yards. No touchdowns, but the volume is going to be there for him. Jacoby Myers is another receiver that I like out of the New England Patriots. They just lost a running back in James White, who really commanded their aerial attack, got a lot of targets. So Jacoby Myers has 29 targets through 3 weeks, including 14 last week. Wow. Has yet to score an NFL touchdown in 1 season and some change here. But especially in PPR formats, he's a very favorable play, and he's going to get you your points. He has a very solid floor. I would look for him. And a bonus play, I like Hunter Renfrow. Something told me to pick him up at 9 a.m. the Sunday morning, trying getting ahead of waivers. And he's just someone that Derek Carr has a lot of confidence in. He averaged 7 targets a game. Doesn't really find the end zone much, but he found it this week. He went 5 for 77. So you want a piece of that, that high-powered Raiders aerial attack now that they have Henry Ruggs, Brian Edwards, Darren Waller, of course. They take to the air a lot. You have a red-hot quarterback in Derek Carr who loves Hunter Renfrow. So in PPR formats, great player, much like Cole Beasley.
Man, who would have thought we would be talking about the Raiders as a high-powered aerial attack? But yeah, Derek Carr and his wide receivers and Waller certainly off to a great start. Let's talk about some matchups that you like for fantasy football players this week. Who are you definitely starting?
This is going to raise some eyebrows here because I like Miles Sanders this week against the Chiefs.
Obviously, Sirianni.
Yes, obviously 2 carries. A lot of people are going to write Miles Sanders and that entire offense off, but I wouldn't be so quick to do that, Jeff. I mean, I have a feeling that this week Sirianni may even overcorrect his mistakes and go to the running game a little bit more. He's going to be asked questions ad nauseum about the running game, and I think you're going to see him lean on that a little bit more, especially against a high-powered Chiefs offense. You don't want them to be on the field as much to give them that opportunity to carve up your defense. So, and the matchup there is great. They're a vulnerable defense to Kansas City. There's going to be opportunities there for Miles Sanders to pick up yards. I like him there. James Robinson was a player that I faded last week. He had 16 carries for 72 yards through 2 games. He had 21 total touches and 88 yards on the ground and a touchdown last week. You have to like, they're starting to trend in a positive direction. Has a favorable matchup this week. I really think that he's starting to get on track. Obviously, you've seen him do it before last season. Now it's all about Urban Meyer leading on the running game and trying to help out your young quarterback. Go figure. And then Brandon Ayuk. How about Brandon Ayuk? He's starting to come alive a little bit. As much as Kyle Shanahan lauded Trent Sherfield, the wide receiver, he only played 2 snaps last week, which is extremely telling. In a matchup where you needed to score points, they leaned on Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. Brandon Ayuk had 6 targets, including his first receiving touchdown of the season. And he also got 1 carry for 8 yards out of the backfield. He's starting to trend up. I like him this week against the Seattle Seahawks, who they're going to have to go to the aerial attack to sort of match Russell Wilson's output.
It was only a matter of time before Brandon Ayuk was going to overtake Trent Sherfield, as you said. Somebody to watch. How about some players that you would avoid this week in week 4 of fantasy football matchups?
Damian Harris, the running back for the Patriots.
Ooh.
He mustered 11 total yards against the Saints. This week they're playing, I believe they're playing the Rams. I don't know that I like that. No, I'm sorry. They're playing a very stingy run defense. Mm-hmm. And Mac Jones is going to have to go to the air, really. And Jacoby Myers is a player that I think has a lot of value in that offense, but Damian Harris really isn't going to get much going on the ground. Chase Evans is another player. They are going against the Rams, and they're 11th. The Rams are 11th toughest against fantasy running backs this season. So I don't know that's a good recipe for someone who only carved out 26 yards on the ground and 11 carries. He's more valuable in a PPR format as well. And I think that I would probably avoid what else do I have here? I think I'm going to avoid. I know last week I talked about the Bears wide receivers, and I apologize about that because I really like their matchup with Justin Fields. But they only combined, Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney only had 10 targets, 3 receptions for 36 yards in an opportune spot. So until their quarterback situation figures itself out, Jeff, I would not deploy any Bear wide receiver. I would hold them. I wouldn't hit the panic button or release them or put them on the waiver wire. But I do think that their better days are ahead, including potentially this week against the Detroit Lions. But I would be hesitant to put them in the lineup, given how things have sort of transpired.
Right. And as you mentioned, going up against tough defenses, Damian Harris up against that Buccaneers defense, which has been a little bit porous against the pass, but certainly strong against
third toughest against fantasy running backs.
All right. So look to avoid Damian Harris this week. That's it. We've got our players to play, our waiver wire claims to make, and of course our players to avoid. And it's all brought to you by Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com, our resident fantasy football expert. Thanks for watching our week 4 edition of Inside the Birds Fantasy Football Show with Andrew DiCecco. For Andrew DiCecco, I'm Jeff Mosher. We'll catch you on the next one.